The sector we're in is about relationships, and it's about how you really understand how to match the objectives, how to match the solutions, and then how to support people in getting that stuff done. If we think about AI taking away some of the challenges for us, how we then utilise, and I think that skill set to evolve of those softer skills, of the how, I think is going to be even more important, because so much of what people perhaps think about doing today won't be needed in the future. I have a hypothesis that far more of us in the sector are neurodiverse than we realise.
Welcome to the Early Insights podcast, an opportunity to understand exactly what it takes to build a career in the data, research, insights sector, and the many different ways to do so. I'm your host, Lewis Reeves, founder and CEO at Walla, and today we have a fantastic guest. Since I started my career in market research, we've been discussing the challenge of getting insights in the boardroom. And our guest today is not only leading the charge, but she's executing and seeing the results. A very big warm welcome to Georgie White.
Thank you very much. It is absolutely fantastic to be here today.
Fantastic. Georgie, your career has been incredibly fascinating. The area I'd love to start is the starting of your career. You didn't start in market research. So maybe tell us about where your career did start.
Yeah, I didn't, like many people. I didn't start there. So I finished university, kind of didn't really know what I wanted to do, didn't apply to a grad program or anything else like that, really wasn't sure. But I came back from traveling and needed to get a job. And the job I had lined up had fallen through. And I started in sales, and I hated it. But I did a year in sales. I'm probably the worst salesperson. But it was great because actually it gave me a good grounding as how sales works. And that's really helped me throughout my career. I think I had to tell myself that quite a lot looking back, but at the time it felt awful. And then I found my way into product development for a financial services company. And I was very fortunate and very privileged to work for a company that was bought out by Merrill Lynch, and then spent 5 years in a very commercial, dynamic environment, covering joint ventures, sales, marketing, and it was fantastic. I absolutely loved it. It was sort of late 20s. I grew a team. I got so many amazing opportunities. But it was also, I was at the heart of the financial crash that happened back in 2007, 2008. And not only was I at the heart of that working for Merrill Lynch, I was also at the heart of it because I was head of product development for mortgages. That was in itself another fascinating experience of seeing a business fail.
Yes.
And go through extreme challenges. And I was made redundant. And that was probably the first time that I actually went, what is it I want to do? And I spent quite a bit of time trying to figure that out and figuring out what I liked doing. And the bits I'd really enjoyed between sales, marketing, and product development was when I'd been talking to customers.
Yes.
So when I'd been out trying to figure out what we needed to do, how I could work out what customers wanted to therefore get the business and develop the right products and solutions. Debatable if I did that correctly, we have to say, with what happened. But anyway, and then I figured out I loved variety.
Yeah.
I love problem solving, and I love impact and change. And that took me to Insight. So I started at Capital One, an amazing organisation. And I spent the first 6 months trying to figure out what the hell I was doing. Because as far as I could tell, is I took a problem that somebody had, I briefed somebody else, i.e. an agency, to do some great work. And then I played it back to the original person and told them what to do.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is a really weird sector. Like, how does this exist? I don't understand it. My friends used to laugh quite a lot because I'd come back and be like, I still don't understand. They're still paying me, but I don't understand why they're paying me. And they've never let me forget that because, of course, that's the sector I then figured out I loved, and I figured out what was actually going on. I had an amazing line manager in Alex Owens, who taught me loads and had such a huge impact in my career. But that's what brought me into Insight. and had an amazing grounding at Cap One, a hugely analytical organization. So working with different data sets to figure out business problems and create better solutions.
Fascinating. And clearly, Georgie, you figured out how to add a little bit of value in the middle between the problem and the agency. And I think, you've really proven as you've gone on to some huge organizations, the British Gases, the BTs of this world. Talk to us a little bit about that value that you added and how you could truly take solving a perhaps sometimes seen as a bit of a side problem in businesses to really having impact and driving the direction of businesses.
I think at the heart is very simple, or at least it sounds very simple, which is how do you really ensure you understand what the business problem is? So how you work with stakeholders, how you figure out what's on their minds, what are their problems, what are their objectives, and then you've got to figure out how you take your objectives and match them to them, which makes it sound incredibly simplistic, and it makes it sound as though if everyone just did that, life would be very simple. But of course, it's very much about building relationships. Yes. It's about the brilliant people you have around you to challenge you, to make you see the world differently, be that your team or your stakeholders or indeed the business problem, and learning all the time around it. So I think I have a brilliant team in my current organisation, in my previous organisations, who I've learned so much from. And then my job is to help them figure out what are the problems that I can help them move out the way. But it really is, the sector we're in is about relationships, and it's about how you really understand how to match the objectives, how to match the solutions, and then how to support people in getting that stuff done.
Awesome. And that's all culminated this year in your promotion to Chief Customer Officer. And then I think it's a brilliant shining light for our industry to have C-suites coming up through the insights profession. Just want to touch back onto your early career. What do you think the impact's been of having that slightly more rounded experience of things like sales, product, marketing, etc.? Do you think that's been useful for your journey?
Hugely useful, because it means two dynamics. One, I get the pressure. Yeah. So I might not be living it every day, but I get it. I understand it. I remember what it was like. Of had you hit the sales target? Were you off trade? Were you not? Like, what was getting in your way? So that's never gone away. But the other is I hate waste. And somewhat controversially, and I say this slightly reluctantly as a board member of the MRS, but I sort of dislike a lot of what our industry does because I think we have huge wastage. I don't think we're focused enough on the commercial outcomes. We're curious. We love figuring out what's going on, what's really happening with customer behaviour. But we don't always do enough about how do we then use that to drive the change, to support people in using that data, using that insight, and landing it across an organisation. And that can be hard. You've got to talk to lots of people. You've got to manage politics. You've got to see the world differently and try and find compromise without sacrificing the original insight. But that commercial background I have gave me that. And I think probably also having seen a business go through failure.
Yes.
And probably gave me a little bit of that as well.
And so it sounds really important and clearly for everyone involved, but closing that loop. So understanding where that insight went, what the commercial outcome of it was. And it sounds like you guys are pretty good at doing that, Holland Barrett.
I think there's always more to do.
Sure.
My poor team will be rolling their eyes. And anybody that's previously worked with me in previous organisations will be rolling their eyes as well. I definitely think we've had more successes. We've got great stakeholders. We work in a great purpose business. We work in an amazing sector, really purposeful of health and wellness. And obviously getting that right for customers is hugely important. So there's a lot of positivity within that, and I've got a brilliant team who, spend their time really trying to figure out what are those business problems and how do we match the two together. But there's more to be done. I don't think we're as good at storytelling as we should be still, and that's a real challenge when you take insights into the C-suite as well. So we don't spend enough time on that. Because we're too busy running to pick the next project up, which also means we're not always as good at driving my point of really ensuring that insight's being acted upon. But we're not bad. we could just be better.
Indeed, and we are certainly making progress. If I think back to
Definitely.
the start of my career to being able to sit next to people like you today, we are making progress. And Georgie, as brilliant as you are, you've mentioned it a few times already, it takes an army to get these things done.
It does.
Talk to me about your team dynamics that you look for, and then what I'd really like to get into is the evolving skill sets in your teams, particularly in this world of technology.
So I think team dynamics are always really interesting. And firstly, if I think about the team, it's got to start with what's the organizational culture, what's the organization strategy, and what's your insight strategy. Because based on that, it will shape what you need in your team. And so, for example, my team at Holland Barrett has a very, very different setup to the team that I had at BT and EE, which would be different again to when I was at Centrica, for example. So you've got to start in that context. But beyond that, it's then about the values and then also what you lack. So before I started at Holland Barrett, I hadn't worked for a retailer. So yes, EE had, has 600-ish stores in the UK, but providing mobile phones and broadbands is, as I soon discovered, very different from fast-moving consumer goods. So, one of the gaps I needed is I need somebody in my team, or quite a few people in my team, who have really great retail experience, because I don't. I will always look to hire or develop for values, because if you've got someone that's engaged, enthusiastic, curious, they want to learn, they might get things wrong, but that's okay. Like, failing is really important. But if the values aren't there, if they don't want to work at the organisation, or they're not intrigued or interested, then that's a challenge that you can't. It doesn't matter how good their skill sets are. If they're brilliant at the what, but not strong enough on the how, you're not going to be able to merge that. And back to my point of our sector, it's about how you get things done. So it's really important.
And it seems like you're slightly bucking a trend in really scaling up your team internally and really putting a lot of value on having that knowledge in-house.
So we scaled up probably about 18 months ago. Okay. We're at the right level now for what we need. The business hadn't invested in us in customer historically. So it's not that so much as we were bucking the trend as we were catching up to where we needed to be to fuel the transformation. So Holland Barrett is going through a huge amount of transformation, from the products we sell through to our stores, through to the brand, our marketing, our tech systems, what we understand about customers, with big ambitions. So we had to scale to meet that desire to ensure the business was doing it in a customer-centric fashion.
And you clearly seem to put a lot of emphasis on quality insight over quantity of insight. And in this moving world, what skill sets are critical to really finding those high quality insights?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. And obviously our favourite buzz phrase or favourite piece of AI and what that's doing is changing everything rapidly. So it's interesting of what that means and how it continues to go. The piece for me is AI can help us all be so much more efficient. People listening will just laugh at this, but I went to do I had to synthesize a presentation for the exec, and I just took my presentation that was 20 pages and I put it into AI and it spat me out the synthesized recommendations. I was like, oh my God, that's just saved me hours, and then I can just edit it in the right way to make sure it works. So AI can help us in all of that stuff and be much more efficient, which for me means we can then free up the time to be really focusing on the bigger areas that add value. So to my point on building relationships, how are you really ensuring you understand the business problems? How are you understanding that you're connecting and influencing? So if we think about AI taking away some of the challenges for us, how we then utilize, and I think that skill set to evolve of those softer skills of the how, I think is going to be even more important, because so much of what people perhaps think about doing today won't be needed in the future. So I think that's a really interesting dynamic. And then I think it creates an interesting one from a technical skill set perspective as well. So I'm fairly certain how I'm writing my prompts are absolutely useless compared to how my team will be writing them, for example. So I think that creates an interesting dynamic. But then also the downside of AI, where the data sets aren't as inclusive.
Yeah.
You can't, if you've only got a certain set of data to then ask it what your customers want, will be a complete disconnect. So I think that creates a really interesting dynamic as well that the whole sector's trying to figure out.
Yeah, it's really intriguing that you sort of see an incredibly important hygiene factor, being able to use these new tools and AI and so forth, but actually put a lot more emphasis on those soft skills, the ability to influence, tell stories, and have a real impact within business.
It is. It is. It's one of the things I speak to my team about in one of my many motivational speeches to them, where this one started with all of our competitors have bigger budgets, have more data, have more insight, have bigger teams than we do. So how are we going to win?
Yeah.
And what it comes down to is it's about creating storytelling, and it's about how you really engage your business and your stakeholders to activate those insights. That's our point of difference.
Fantastic. I think as all researchers watching this at the moment, paints a very good picture for our future. That if we can work on those soft skills, we certainly have careers to come.
We do. I should say, of course, technical skills are hugely important. Of course they are. But it's how we continue to evolve.
I think you're living proof of this, Georgie, that we can as an industry, and we're incredibly good at going very deep into methodologies and technical skills, but it's ensuring that great work has the impact and getting that right balance between those skill sets.
It is. I talk about a business partnering framework with my teams, which is very simple. It's about credible experts. So are you the technical expert in your field? It's about commercial savviness. Do you understand and do you think about what your stakeholders are feeling and thinking and empathy to them? It's about honest communication. So getting the insight to the hands of people that need it at the right time, which, by the way, won't be the people in the debrief. It'll be somebody else. And then it's about decision influencing. So are you there? Are you part of the decision? Are you helping them figure out what they should use, what they shouldn't use, what they can compromise? And then last but not least, it's about leadership. So it doesn't matter what level you are. It doesn't matter where you sit in the organisation. You are here as a leader on behalf of the customer across the organisation. And it's a very simple framework. I've used various different versions of it for many years. But a lot of our sector stops at that credible expert.
Yeah.
Because we're curious, we love data, we love spending the time, we love getting that understanding, and that's amazing. But effectively, we should be trusted, and we've got to earn that trust. Yeah. But you don't need to worry about the methodology. I've done that for you. It's all good. What I'm going to talk to you about today is how we solve these problems, and that's a really important shift. So we've got to spend more time on the other 4 areas.
Yeah.
To really be successful.
Fascinating. That'll lead to a nice segue to talk about some of your work that's slightly less commercially focused, but giving back to the industry. So you are chair of the Client Council, you are an MRS board member.
Yeah.
Would love to get into how you got into those roles and working more closely with the MRS and the industry as a whole, and then shine a bit of a light about what do those roles entail and what sort of work are you guys doing and thinking about how we generally improve the industry.
Yeah, certainly. So as with, I think, probably some things kind of going along the way, there's a little bit of opportunity, a little bit of luck that happens. So I think Jane got in touch and said, did I fancy joining the Senior Client Council? And, why wouldn't I? What a great opportunity to discuss problems, challenges that we're all facing client side with my peers. And it's been one of the things I've loved because you realise that you're not alone. Yeah. Everything that you're worrying about or thinking about, everybody else is thinking about. They've just got a different logo or brand in a different sector. But you suddenly realise in this connection, and then you learn from them again.
Yes. So
you get to hear different perspectives, you get to hear different challenges, things you agree with and things you disagree with. So it was fantastic joining that. And actually, it's one of the big things I talk to my team about is how do they get more external, go spend time at conferences, like the MRS client conference last week, and other things, to learn from other people and see how other sectors are doing.
And just to touch on that, it strikes me as incredibly collaborative, that you guys are all very willing to share, and the competitive nature stays far away.
It does. In part, to be fair, at the Senior Client Council, we have structured it because it can get quite challenging.
Sure.
So there are very few direct competitors within that client council. But it's, it meets a handful of times, so about 4 times throughout the year. I took on the chair probably about 18 months, 2 years ago, really with a view of what is it we can do to support the industry, as you said about within that. And if I started earlier on, I said about how I get really irritated with a bunch of stuff that the industry does. We don't get to just complain about it. You have to do something about it. And this is some of the ways of enabling us to do that. I think the client dynamic's really interesting. I would say this, I do realise as a client. But the Senior Client Council and indeed clients have a huge amount of buying power.
Yes.
And I don't think we always use that for good, or as good as we could do. We use it for our commercial aims. We use it to, make sure we're driving the right investments, etc., from the business perspective. But actually, you can also use it for good. So one of the priorities of the Senior Client Council was about inclusivity and diversity and equality. So actually just asking all of our agencies, would you sign the MRS CEO Inclusion Pledge?
Yeah.
A really simple thing, right? But actually, as soon as we started doing that, agencies are like, oh, this actually matters to you. Not that any agency was saying, that's a bad thing, but it wasn't necessarily a conversation because we hadn't asked them.
Yeah.
So very, very simple piece of where you can start going, actually, this is really important. And it's not just about signing the pledge. It's then about how you start learning from each other. So back at BT, we started running all of our procurement insight processes with EDI included, because we needed to learn and we wanted to understand and work with partners that had the same values that could help us learn and we could learn with them. So that's for me a very simple example, but where as a client side, we can really shift and help the sector as well.
Totally, and I'm sure you learn from your role every day. Commercial outcomes for businesses drive prioritization.
It does. So that's what took me to the SCC. It's a brilliant group of people who I love having that opportunity to work with, and it's not often you'd get that kind of engagement. And then from the board, again, it comes back to, if I want to try and change the industry, well, you've got to try and do something about it. So it's been fantastic. I only joined in April. I'm absolutely loving my board experience. Lots to do and lots to learn. It's my first board experience as a non-exec. I'm absolutely loving it.
Fantastic. And again, taking on similar challenges around how we can evolve the industry, I presume slightly more generic than the Senior Client Council.
Yeah, definitely. I've learned so much. Like, I didn't realise how much the MRS does for the industry. Listening to Deborah and Jane talk about, their lobbying of Parliament and government, for example, I was like, I didn't even think about that. Getting involved in standards and protocols. So it's been a really great experience of just realising what an amazing member and body we have in the MRS and how much more we, can really benefit. Before I was a board member, I didn't realise we had the code line.
Yeah.
And that's an incredible facility that's available to members, be it client or agency, to guide really quickly if you're not sure if you're doing something in line or if you're approaching it quite correctly, that we just wouldn't have thought, didn't know existed, but we were struggling with things that we'd just try and figure out ourselves.
And I think you touched on a really great point here, and I think we as an industry struggle with this, which is our own PR.
Yes.
And you're absolutely right, the MRS is doing some fantastic things, but a lot of us don't know about them. How do you think the MRS tackle that challenge?
It's great. It's one we've been talking about at a board. So I think the MRS has done a lot more campaigning about demonstrating insights driving impact. I think starting to, collaborate more with the likes of ISBA, who do a great job at demonstrating, for example, marketing effectiveness. But of course, marketing effectiveness is a range of insight tools. So it gets quite interesting from that dynamic. I think as well, we need to do a better job of demonstrating to clients the value.
Sure.
Because actually, when I first became a member, I inherited a team that were members, and that's how I sort of first came across company partnership, company membership. And it's fantastic. You get access to this amazing training resource. You get access to this network that I wasn't even aware of before. In addition to, the protocols and the standards, and it's so cost efficient. So again, back to, ROI and what drives it. But yeah, I'm not sure I've quite answered your question.
No,
but it's definitely something we've got to figure out.
I think that we have a great leader in the MRS. And would you encourage other people to sign up and put their hat in the ring for MRS board seats in the future?
Definitely would. It's a brilliant experience to better understand and to better shape what we're doing.
Fantastic. So, Georgie, you've always been a trailblazer, as we've seen throughout your career.
Oh, I don't know about that.
I have been fascinated to see you as one of the first people, certainly in my career, to stand on the stage and talk about neurodiversity. As someone that grew up incredibly dyslexic and seeing it probably more as a taboo in my early career and certainly my parents' generation, to you really shining a light on it. And clearly a very broad topic that we've not got all day to solve and discuss. But would love just for you to touch on some of the sort of opportunities that neurodiversity yields.
Yeah, I think it is obviously, for some it is an incredible challenge. I also believe it is an opportunity and a requirement for businesses to better adjust, be that private, public, commercial, etc., to better adjust to realizing consumer needs here, and also the huge benefits within the workforce as well. Like you, I am dyslexic, and I spent 20 years of my career basically not telling anybody. I was deeply ashamed. It was a taboo. I genuinely believed that if anyone knew I was dyslexic, they wouldn't possibly see me in the same way that they did, and I couldn't possibly be a director or senior leader. That just wouldn't happen. And it didn't change overnight at all. I went on various different personal development things, and then really faced into it. And spent a lot of time crying. I remember my husband going, "Will you stop? Like, it's 2 a.m. in the morning. You have got to stop crying." And was very, very fearful about telling people. And the first few times I did, I cried some more. And then I started to realize, as I kind of talked to people about it, actually the reason I am, she says rather modestly, good at what I do is because I'm dyslexic. Yeah. It is because I see the world slightly differently. It's because my brain is wired in a slightly different way. That means I make connections quickly. It's got a whole host of benefits. So I have a hypothesis that far more of us in the sector are neurodiverse than we realise. If I think about the skill sets that we have, the passion, the curiosity, the data, the patterns, the creativity, all of those are, strengths of a neurodiverse individual typically. So I think there are more of us than we realise. I think it fuels our sector, and indeed many other sectors, more. Without a doubt, for many people it is a challenge, and how you support and adapt their environments, for example, or what they need to better suit them is hugely important.
Well, look, Georgie, I thank you a lot, and I'm sorry that you had to shed so many tears, but I can certainly say that they are benefiting me and many others in the sector. As you say, I think we do have a lot of neurodiversity, and giving us confidence and a platform to really lean in to some of those challenges that we face, and as you say, some of the opportunities they yield on the other side, and we should be proud, and we should be having those conversations. I think it's really important.
We should, I agree.
To close up, we are going to have some quick fire questions. I think
Excellent.
You've already given a significant amount of advice to a young researcher. I think someone starting their career knows how to plot their path to the boardroom. But what one tip would you give to someone coming into their career? Doesn't necessarily need to be in their earlier years, could be at any point. What bit of advice would you give to them?
Take more risk. And fear it a little less, and just be aware it's a really squiggly career. It's not linear. So that risk taking is really important.
Fantastic. And thinking about your own career, question of anything you would have done differently or perhaps sooner in your career?
I regret that I spent so much of my career afraid and driven by imposter syndrome because of my dyslexia and not facing into that. Now, on one hand, it did help fuel it and it helped push me, but I wasted a lot of energy, an awful lot of energy on something I really shouldn't have.
Fantastic. And last but not least, one bit of advice that you live your life by, live your career by, that you share with the audience.
So we spend more time with our work colleagues than we do with our loved ones. So for me, it's whatever you're doing, you've got to love it and you've got to have fun. And that's hugely, hugely important. Yes, work hard, all of that good stuff. If you don't enjoy it, if you're not having fun, if you don't work with brilliant people, find something else, because it's important how we use the time we have.
Incredible advice. Georgie, we've been so lucky to have you on the podcast today. As I've said many a times, a true trailblazer, risk taker, leading from the front, dragging insights into the boardroom and making sure, even if they're kicking and screaming, that they're heard and they're acted upon and the results are gained from it. And not only that, giving back and opening doors for others and creating platforms. It's a true pleasure to have had you on the podcast.
I
Thank
am
you.
absolutely blushing. I feel like you must. I want to look over my shoulder, like, who are you talking about? But thank you. It's been
As you
lovely.
said, sooner you get rid of the imposter syndrome, the better. Good stuff.